If you understand English, but your mouth goes silent the moment you try to speak, this is not because you are bad at English, and it is not because you lack confidence. It is not because your vocabulary is too small, and it is definitely not because you haven't studied hard enough. The real reason is much deeper, and once you see it clearly, you will never blame yourself again for not being able to speak. Most people think speaking English is a language problem. In reality, it is a brain coordination problem. Your brain knows the language, but it does not know how to release it under pressure. That is why you can understand podcasts. You can follow movies. You can read articles. You can even think, yes, I know what I want to say. But when the moment comes, nothing comes out. Your mind is active. Your heart beats faster. So your mouth feels tight. And suddenly, your brain feels empty. This moment is not failure. This moment is a signal that your brain is switching into survival mode. When the brain feels unsafe, it does not care about communication. It cares about protection. And speaking a foreign language, especially in front of others, often feels unsafe to the brain. Not because English is dangerous, but because your brain connects speaking with judgment. Judgment, mistakes, embarrassment, looking stupid, being corrected, being laughed at, being compared. Even if none of these things are happening right now, your brain remembers them. The brain does not think in logic. It thinks in patterns. If you have ever felt small when speaking English, your brain recorded that feeling. If you have ever been corrected too sharply, your brain recorded that moment. If you have ever frozen once, your brain remembers it clearly. And the next time you try to speak, your brain says, "Let's not do this again." So it shuts down the speaking system. This is why forcing yourself to speak more often makes the problem worse. You are pushing a system that is already tense. Now let's talk about something most English learners never hear. Understanding English and speaking English do not use the same brain pathway. Understanding is passive. Speaking is active. When you listen, your brain receives information. There is no risk, no exposure, no judgment. When you speak, your brain must do many things at the same time. It must choose words, build sentence structure, control pronunciation, monitor grammar, predict the listener's reaction, and protect your self-image. See, all in real time. This is not a language task. This is a high-level cognitive task. And here is the key problem. Most learners train understanding, but expect speaking to appear automatically. They consume English. They collect words. They watch videos. They listen to podcasts. And then they wonder, why can't I speak? Because speaking is not a result of more input. Speaking is a result of a trained output system. Think of it like this. You can watch thousands of hours of basketball. You can understand the rules perfectly. You can even explain strategies. But when you step onto the court, your body does not move smoothly. Not because you are stupid, but because your nervous system is untrained. Speaking English works the same way. Your brain has knowledge, but your speaking system lacks automation. So under pressure, your brain tries to control everything consciously, and conscious control is slow. That is why you translate in your head. That is why you search for words. That is why you lose your sentence halfway. Fluent speakers do not think faster. They think less. They are not better at grammar. They are better at letting go. They trust patterns that are already built. Now, here is a painful truth. Many English learners are too smart for their own good. They analyze too much. They monitor too much. They correct themselves too much. They try to speak perfectly, and perfection kills flow. Your brain cannot be creative when it is afraid of mistakes. This is why children speak easily, not because they are smarter, but because they do not protect their identity. They speak without defending themselves. Adults, especially intelligent adults, build strong self-protection systems, and language learning triggers that protection. So every time you try to speak English, you are not just speaking, you are defending who you are. This is why motivation is not enough. This is why confidence tips don't work. This is why just speak more feels exhausting. You are fighting your own nervous system, and no one told you that. Now let me say something important. You do not need more vocabulary. You do not need more grammar rules. And you do not need to push yourself harder. You need safety. You need repetition without pressure. You need speaking patterns that feel familiar, not impressive. Fluency is not built by performance. It is built by comfort. When your brain feels safe, it releases language naturally. When your brain trusts the process, your mouth opens by itself. This is why some people speak better when they are tired, relaxed, or not trying to impress anyone. Their guard is down, and language flows. The goal is not to speak more. The goal is to make speaking feel normal. In the next part, we will break a dangerous illusion, the belief that learning more words and grammar will eventually turn into speaking. It won't, not automatically, and once you understand why, you will stop wasting years on the wrong effort. You already know more English than you think. That sentence sounds comforting, but it is not meant to comfort you. It is meant to wake you up. Because the problem has never been how much English you know. The problem is that what you know does not show up when you need it. Most English learners live with a quiet belief, a belief that feels logical, safe, and responsible. If I learn more vocabulary, if I understand grammar deeply enough, speaking will eventually happen. This belief keeps people studying for years, and it keeps them silent for years. Vocabulary and grammar do not turn into speech automatically. They never have. They never will. The human brain does not work like that. To understand why, you need to separate two things clearly: knowing English and accessing English. Knowing lives in memory. Access lives in action. Most learners train memory and hope access will appear. It doesn't. That is why you recognize words instantly, but cannot produce them. That is why you understand sentences, but cannot create them. That is why English feels familiar, but unreachable. Recognition is passive. Production is active. Recognition happens without risk. Production happens under pressure. Your brain treats these two activities very differently. When you recognize a word, your brain says, "I've seen this before." When you try to speak, your brain says, "I must perform now." Performance changes everything. Under performance, the brain prioritizes speed, safety, and self-protection. And this is where grammar and vocabulary fail you. Grammar rules live in conscious memory. Vocabulary lists live in storage. Speaking needs instant retrieval. Instant retrieval does not ask questions. It does not check rules. It does not confirm correctness. It releases patterns. This is why fluent speakers do not sound fluent because they know more. They sound fluent because they hesitate less. Not because they think faster, but because they think less. Now, let's look at how most learners study. They read explanations. They watch lessons. They understand concepts. Understanding feels good. Understanding feels like control. The mind feels satisfied. But speaking does not reward understanding. Speaking rewards repetition under low pressure. This is where intelligent learners struggle the most. Smart people love clarity. They love reasons. They love to know why something works. So they keep learning. They keep refining. They keep preparing. Preparation becomes a hiding place. Because as long as you are preparing, you do not have to expose yourself. And speaking is exposure. Exposure of accent. Exposure of mistakes. Exposure of identity. So the brain delays it. I'm not ready yet. Just a bit more vocabulary. One more grammar course. Years pass inside that sentence. Now here is something uncomfortable but true. More vocabulary does not make you speak better. It gives you more options to hesitate. More grammar knowledge does not make you fluent. It gives you more rules to monitor. Monitoring slows everything down. Fluency does not tolerate monitoring. It requires release. This is why many learners speak worse when they try harder. Effort adds tension. Tension blocks access. Now think about this carefully. When you speak your native language, do you choose grammar? No. You release meaning. Grammar follows automatically. In English, learners reverse the order. They choose grammar first, then try to express meaning. By the time meaning arrives, the moment is gone. The listener has moved on. The energy has dropped. And the speaker feels small. This emotional feedback matters. Because your brain remembers emotion more strongly than information. If speaking English often ends with embarrassment or frustration, your brain learns a simple lesson. Speaking equals danger. So next time, it protects you by freezing. Now let's talk about practice. Many learners say, I just need to practice speaking more. But practice without the right conditions does not build fluency. It builds habits. And most learners practice the wrong habit. They practice stopping. They practice translating. They practice correcting themselves mid-sentence. They practice apologizing. They practice silence. The brain does not know whether a habit is good or bad. It only knows repetition. What you repeat, you automate. That is why speaking more sometimes makes people worse. They automate hesitation. See, fluent speakers did not become fluent by speaking more randomly. They spoke inside safe patterns. They repeated familiar structures. They stayed within rhythm. They reduced decision-making. Decision-making is expensive. Fluency is cheap. Now here is a key insight. Fluent speakers use fewer structures than learners imagine. They recycle the same sentence shapes. They reuse the same transitions. They repeat the same rhythms. They sound natural because they sound predictable. Learners try to sound advanced. Fluent speakers try to sound clear. Clarity beats complexity every time. But learners are taught the opposite. They are praised for complexity. They are corrected for simplicity. So they chase advanced language before basic patterns are automatic. This creates a permanent gap. Advanced knowledge on top of unstable foundations. And under pressure, everything collapses. Now listen very carefully. If a word does not appear instantly, it does not belong to your speaking system. If a structure needs thinking, it is not ready. This is not failure. This is information. Fluency is not about how much you know. It is about how much you can access without effort. Effort is the enemy. This is why some people speak fluently with limited vocabulary. They trained access, not storage. They built pathways instead of collections. Now think about how you trained English. How many hours went into learning? How many hours went into releasing language without thinking? The difference explains everything. Your English is not trapped. It is just locked in the wrong system. Once you understand this, you stop blaming yourself. And when blame disappears, your nervous system relaxes. Relaxation opens access. This is not motivation talk. This is biology. The brain releases what feels safe. Your job is not to know more. Your job is to make access feel normal. That requires a different system. A system that trains patterns, not rules. A system that lowers pressure, not raises expectations. A system that builds automaticity, not perfection. This is how fluent speakers are made, not by talent, not by immersion miracles, but by designing repetition that removes thinking from speech. In the next layer, we will look closely at how these automatic speaking patterns are actually built. Step by step, without forcing, without performance, without pressure. Once you see that mechanism clearly, fluency will stop feeling like a mystery. It will feel like a process, and processes can be trained. Fluent speakers do not speak better English. They speak with less interference. That is the truth most people never hear. They are not faster thinkers. They are not more confident by nature. They are not mentally gifted. They simply removed obstacles that slow everyone else down. Once you understand this, fluency stops looking magical. It starts looking mechanical, and mechanics can be trained. Let's begin with a clear separation. There is speaking, and there is controlling speech. Most learners try to speak while controlling every detail. Fluent speakers let speech happen. Control feels intelligent. Release feels risky. But fluency lives in release, not control. The human brain has two modes. One mode is analytical. It evaluates, it checks, it corrects, it monitors. The other mode is automatic. It reacts, it releases, it flows, it responds. You cannot activate both modes at the same time. When analysis is on, automatic systems turn off. This is why thinking kills fluency. Fluent speakers did not eliminate thinking. They postponed it. They trained patterns outside of performance moments, so thinking was no longer needed during speech. This is the core mechanism. Automatic speaking patterns are not created while performing. They are created before performance. Most learners reverse this. They try to figure things out while speaking. That is like learning to swim while drowning. Now let's break a myth. Fluent speakers do not have a larger active vocabulary. They have a smaller, stronger, more reliable set of patterns. Patterns are not sentences. Patterns are shapes. So shapes your brain recognizes instantly. For example, I think that. What I mean is, the reason is, I'm not sure, but it depends on. These are not advanced. They are foundational, but fluent speakers use them without hesitation. Learners know them, but they do not trust them. Trust is the difference. Trust comes from repetition without pressure. Pressure destroys trust. This is why classroom learning often fails to produce speakers. The environment rewards correctness, not flow, not rhythm, not continuity. Students learn to pause, to self-correct, to apologize. These behaviors feel polite, but they are fluency poison. Fluent speakers keep moving. They allow mistakes to pass. They prioritize momentum. Momentum matters more than accuracy, because momentum keeps the automatic system alive. Once momentum breaks, Xiao's analysis jumps in, and speech collapses. This is why one small mistake can destroy an entire sentence. The mistake is not the problem. The reaction is fluent speakers treat mistakes as noise. Learners treat mistakes as danger. Now let's talk about how patterns are built. Patterns are built through low-risk repetition. Low risk is not optional, it is essential. The brain does not automate what feels unsafe. This is not mindset talk. This is neuroscience. The brain automates what it can release without fear. So fluent speakers did not practice by pushing themselves into fear. They practiced inside safety. Safety does not mean comfort, it means predictability, predictable input, predictable structure, predictable rhythm. This is why repetition works. Not because repetition is boring, but because repetition is safe. When the brain knows what comes next, it relaxes. Relaxation unlocks automation. Now here is where most learners go wrong. They chase novelty, new vocabulary, new topics, new expressions, new challenges. Novelty excites the mind, but it blocks automation. Automation needs sameness. Fluent speakers repeat the same patterns thousands of times, not consciously, not deliberately, naturally, because their environment feeds them repetition. Learners rarely build that environment. They consume content, but they do not recycle it. Consumption creates familiarity. Recycling creates access. Access is built by reuse. Now consider this carefully. A sentence you have used 100 times is more valuable than a sentence you understand 1,000 times. Usage beats exposure. Exposure creates recognition. Usage creates reflex. Fluent speakers live in reflex. This is why they can speak while tired, while distracted, while emotional. Reflex does not require energy. Analysis does. Now let's talk about the body. Speaking is not a mental act. It is a physical act. Sound is movement. Breath is movement. Rhythm is movement. Fluent speakers speak from the body, not the head. Learners speak from the head. They hold their breath. They tighten their jaw. They control their mouth. Control creates stiffness. Stiffness kills rhythm. Rhythm matters more than words. Listeners forgive grammar. They forgive accent. They forgive mistakes. They do not forgive broken rhythm. Broken rhythm signals uncertainty. Fluent speakers protect rhythm at all costs. They stretch sounds. They simplify structure. They repeat themselves, not because they lack skill, but because rhythm keeps speech alive. Now think about how learners are trained. They are trained to stop, to think, to fix, to restart. Each stop breaks rhythm. Each break invites analysis. Each analysis slows access. This loop becomes a habit. Fluent speakers built a different habit. They trained continuation. If a word does not come, they paraphrase. If grammar fails, they simplify. If a sentence breaks, they move on. Movement matters more than perfection. This is not laziness. This is efficiency. Now let's address another illusion. Many learners believe fluent speakers speak with confidence. In reality, confidence is a result, not a cause. Fluent speakers sound confident because they are not deciding. Decision-making creates hesitation. Hesitation sounds like insecurity. Remove decisions, confidence appears. This is why scripted speakers often sound fluent. Not because scripts are magic, but because scripts remove choice. Choice is heavy, patterns are light. Automatic speaking patterns remove choice. This is the goal, not to sound impressive, but to sound available. Availability means your language shows up when needed. Now let's look at how this is trained. Fluent speakers spend time speaking without listeners. They talk to themselves. They repeat phrases. They narrate actions. This is not childish. This is strategic. Speaking without judgment trains release. Release builds access. Access builds fluency. Learners often avoid this because it feels pointless. If no one hears me, what's the use? The use is neurological. You are training pathways. Pathways do not care about audience. They care about repetition. Now consider this. Every time you hesitate, you reinforce hesitation. Every time you release, you reinforce release. The brain does not know intention. It knows behavior. So fluent speakers did not wait to feel fluent. They acted fluent before they sounded fluent. This is not pretending. This is training. They accepted imperfect output as the price of automation. Learners demand quality first. Fluent speakers demand continuity. Continuity wins. Now let's bring everything together. Automatic speaking patterns are built when you reduce choices, you repeat structures, you protect rhythm, you lower pressure, you allow mistakes, you continue speaking. This combination trains the nervous system, not the intellect. Fluency is a nervous system skill. That is why motivation fades. That is why discipline burns out. Nervous systems do not respond to force. They respond to safety and repetition. Once you respect that, everything changes. You stop asking, "How can I sound better?" You start asking, "How can I make speaking feel normal?" Normal is the target, not advanced, not perfect, not impressive. Normal. When speaking feels normal, fluency follows. This is why immersion works for some people. Not because of exposure, but because repetition becomes unavoidable. Patterns repeat. Choices disappear. Speech becomes normal. You can create this effect without leaving your country. But you must design for it, not with willpower, with systems. Systems that remove thinking. Systems that remove pressure. Systems that repeat structure. This is how fluent speakers are built, not overnight, not magically, but inevitably. In the final layer, we will put all of this together into a simple daily system, not a challenge, not a routine that burns you out, a system that fits real life, a system that respects your brain, a system that turns understanding into automatic speech. Once you see that system clearly, you will realize something important. You were never bad at speaking. You were just never trained the way fluent speakers are. If speaking English still feels hard, it is not because you lack ability. It is because your daily system is training the wrong thing. Most people do not fail at English. They fail at system design. They rely on motivation. They rely on discipline. They rely on pushing themselves. But fluency is not built by force. It is built by alignment. Alignment between how the brain works and how you train it every day. Let's be very clear. You do not need a challenge. You do not need a strict routine. You do not need to wake up at 5 in the morning. You need a system that quietly trains access. A system that works even when you are tired, even when you are busy, even when motivation is gone. Fluent speakers did not become fluent because they tried harder. They became fluent because their daily environment made speaking unavoidable. Your job is not to copy their life. Your job is to copy the mechanism. The mechanism is simple, frequent, low pressure, predictable, repeatable. That combination trains fluency. Anything that breaks one of these creates resistance. Now, let's build the system step by step. First, you must separate learning time from speaking time. This is critical. Learning time is analytical. Speaking time must be non-analytical. Never mix them. When you analyze during speaking, you poison the process. So the first rule is this: Speaking time is a no-thinking zone. No grammar checking, no word searching, no correcting mid-sentence. If something is missing, you move on. Movement is more important than accuracy. This rule alone changes everything. Now the second layer. You must limit your speaking material. Unlimited choice creates hesitation. So instead of trying to speak about everything, you choose a narrow lane. The same topics, the same structures, the same sentence shapes. Not forever, but for long enough to build automation. For example, you choose 5 basic sentence frames. I think that what I'm trying to say is, the reason is, it depends on, in my experience, these are not impressive. They are powerful, because power comes from availability. You repeat these frames every day in different situations, with different content. The structure stays. Only the meaning changes. This is how patterns are trained. Now, the third layer. You must speak without audience pressure. Audience pressure activates performance mode. Performance mode kills automation. So your daily speaking should happen mostly alone. Not because you are afraid, but because you are strategic. Talking to yourself is not weird. It is professional training. Athletes do it. Musicians do it. Speakers do it. Language learners avoid it because it feels unproductive. But productivity is not the goal. Automation is. When you speak alone, your nervous system stays calm. Calm allows repetition. Repetition builds access. This is the fastest path. Now the fourth layer, you must reuse the same input. Most learners consume new content every day. New podcasts, new videos, new topics. This feels exciting, but it slows fluency. Instead, you choose a small set of content and recycle it deeply. Listen again, shadow lightly, paraphrase out loud, retell it in your own words. Same content, different passes. This creates familiarity. Familiarity creates safety. Safety unlocks speech. Fluent speakers are surrounded by repeated language. Learners are surrounded by endless novelty. Choose repetition. Now the fifth layer. You must lower expectations radically. Expecting yourself to sound good creates tension. Expecting yourself to continue speaking creates progress. So your daily goal is not quality. Your daily goal is continuity. Did you keep going? Did you avoid stopping? Did you let mistakes pass? If yes, you succeeded. This redefines success. And when success feels achievable, the brain relaxes. Relaxation accelerates learning. Now let's talk about time. You do not need hours. 10 minutes a day, done correctly, beats 2 hours done wrong. Because fluency is not built by volume. It is built by frequency. Short, daily, predictable. This trains the nervous system. Long, intense, irregular sessions train resistance. Consistency beats intensity every single time. Now here is the part most people misunderstand. You do not feel progress immediately. In fact, you may feel worse at first. Because you removed control. And control feels safe. But underneath, something important is happening. Your brain is learning that speaking is survivable. Each imperfect session teaches the same lesson. I spoke. Nothing bad happened. That lesson accumulates, and one day, without warning, speech feels lighter. Not perfect, but lighter. Words appear faster. Sentences continue longer. Silence feels shorter. This is fluency emerging, not as a breakthrough, but as a shift. Now, let's address a final trap. Many learners abandon systems too early. They say, "This doesn't work for me." But fluency systems do not show results like workouts. They show results like posture. Slow, gradual, almost invisible. Until one day, you realize something changed. You no longer panic. You no longer freeze. You no longer overthink every sentence. You just speak. That moment feels ordinary, and that is the sign it worked. Because fluency is not a performance state, it is a normal state. Now bring everything together. A natural daily system has 4 rules. Speak without thinking. Limit your patterns. Repeat familiar input. Lower expectations. This system respects your brain. It works with your nervous system, not against it. And that is why it works long term. You do not need to become someone else. You do not need to be more confident. You do not need to be fearless. You just need a system that removes unnecessary pressure. Once pressure disappears, language returns. Because language was never the problem, the system was. And now, you finally have one that leads forward.